Josiah watched from the porch as his mom climbed into the van, its sides covered in painted flowers and peace signs. She knelt in front of him one last time, ruffling his hair with a sad smile.
"I'm sorry, Josiah,"
she said, her voice soft.
"Love has to be free. It can't be bottled up in a marriage, you know?"
She kissed his forehead, stood up, and waved as she climbed into the driver's seat. Josiah waved back, not feeling much at all. The van rattled away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and an empty driveway. But that was okay. The person Josiah really admired wasn't leaving. It was his dad, standing right next to him. Josiah's dad was an exterminator. To most people, it wasn't exactly a heroic job, but to Josiah, it was everything. His dad was the one people called when their homes were overrun, when ants built armies under the floorboards or roaches made a mess in the dark corners. He watched as his dad dealt with all kinds of pests without a shred of fear, and Josiah tagged along every weekend he could. He loved it. Even more, he loved being part of it. His dad even let him kill a few bugs sometimes, laughing when Josiah stomped them out. His dad gave him a nickname, Blug the Bug Killer, and Josiah wore it like a badge of honor. Years went by, and Josiah grew into that nickname. Josiah followed in his dad's footsteps, becoming an exterminator just like him. He got a job at National Pest Extermination Incorporated, and he loved it. It wasn't just about the work. It was the sense of power, the idea that he was the one people relied on to reclaim their space. Josiah dreamed of running his own extermination company one day, making his dad proud. He wasn't afraid to take risks either. He'd crush wasp nests with his bare hands just to prove he could handle it, laughing through the stings, all while his co-workers and clients looked on in shock. But Josiah never noticed their reactions. All he felt was power. Smashing those pests made him feel invincible, just like his dad had seemed all those years ago. Then came the day that changed everything. Josiah was working a job at an old cabin. Termites had turned the place into a crumbling disaster. He wasn't alone this time. A co-worker had come along, standing beside him as they looked at the empty, run-down cabin.
"Looks like no one's home, Josiah," his co-worker said, glancing around nervously. "Maybe we should come back later?"
But Josiah wasn't interested in waiting. He shook his head, muttering something about time being money, and marched right up to the door. Josiah stormed inside without a second thought, spray in one hand, lighter in the other. Flames shot across the dry wood, termites scattering in panic. Some caught fire, buzzing through the air in a frenzy. Josiah didn't care. He torched everything in sight. His co-worker stayed outside, watching in shock as the situation unraveled. The termites went into chaos, some on fire, buzzing through the air, others scattering in a frenzy. Josiah didn't stop. He kept going, screaming for them to bring it on, smashing and torching anything that moved.
"Josiah, get out of there!"
His partner's voice cracked, frantic.
"The whole place is gonna blow!"
But Josiah didn't hear him. He was cackling, a wild laugh echoing through the smoke-filled cabin as he watched the bugs scatter, some of them burning, others crushed under his boots.
"Burn, you worthless pests!"
he shouted, oblivious to everything else. His co-worker could only watch in horror as the flames roared louder, swallowing the cabin whole, and Josiah stood right in the middle of it. Flames licking at the walls, the ceiling giving way above him. Everything became a blur. Heat, smoke, the world caving in. He blinked, and suddenly, it was all gone. No fire, no collapsing cabin, no smoke clogging his lungs. Instead, Josiah found himself standing in a small shop. He looked around, eyes wide, taking in shelves packed with every extermination supply he could think of. He glanced up at the window, where the sign, Blug's Pesky Solutions, was painted in bold letters. His reflection was there too, distorted in the glass, but Josiah didn't notice it, not yet. All he could focus on was the name. He couldn't believe it.
"Plugs? It's real?"
he whispered, his voice barely audible, tinged with disbelief. The smell of chemicals, the sharp tang of bug spray. It hit him all at once, taking him back to those dusty supply stores he used to visit with his dad. This was the shop he'd always dreamed of opening, the one he'd imagined owning someday. It was perfect. too perfect. He felt disoriented, like he was drifting in a strange dream, but everything felt so incredibly real. Josiah walked through the shop, but something felt off. He finally saw his reflection in one of the windows and stopped, staring. His face was gone, replaced by glossy, segmented eyes, black and unblinking, like an insect's. He looked down at his hands, only to realize they weren't hands anymore. Instead, they were sharp, jointed limbs, the frontmost of 4 insect-like legs, clicking slightly as he moved. His 2 hind legs, though strangely more humanoid in structure, still looked alien to him, covered in a hard, chitinous shell that glistened under the shop lights. Josiah felt the movement above his head, a twitching sensation, and realized he had long antennae, each one stretching out nearly as tall as he was. He stood there, towering at over 2 meters, looking like something out of a nightmare, an enormous bug, distorted into a humanoid form. Panic surged through him, but before he could react, the bell above the door chimed. A customer walked in, white cane tapping on the floor. Josiah swallowed his panic. He focused on what he knew, helping people, solving their pest problems. Hello, welcome to Blug's Pesky Solutions, where we'll provide you with swift solutions on the fly, Josiah said, trying to sound cheerful, his voice only quivering slightly. My name's Blug. How can I help you today? The customer smiled politely, unaware of anything unusual. They explained that they needed help with the bedbugs that had taken over their apartment. Josiah nodded, forcing a grin. Bedbugs, huh? Nasty little critters. But don't you worry, we'll get them sorted out in no time. He worked with his usual enthusiasm, pretending everything was fine, guiding the customer through possible solutions, the feeling of normalcy almost enough to calm him. And when the customer left, satisfied, Josiah allowed himself to believe it. Maybe it was all in his head. Maybe he wasn't really a bug. The second customer was different. Josiah was behind the shelves restocking when he heard the door chime. He stepped out to greet the new arrival, antennae twitching slightly as he moved. The moment the customer laid eyes on him, they froze, staring stiff as a board at the sight of this towering, sapient, insect-like figure. Josiah did his best to offer a reassuring smile, or whatever the equivalent of a smile was now, and launched into his usual speech. Hello, welcome to Blug's Pesky Solutions. How can I... The customer's face went pale. They didn't say a word, just stood there, trembling, eyes locked on him. And then, to Josiah's confusion, he heard the unmistakable sound of liquid hitting the floor. The customer had wet themselves. Josiah's eyes widened. He reached for the counter, grabbed a napkin, and took a careful step forward. Here, you might need this, he said, trying to keep his voice gentle. In response, the customer just screamed, a loud, piercing wail that made Josiah flinch. They turned and bolted, running out the door, their footsteps fading as they sprinted down the street. Josiah stood there, utterly befuddled. He turned back toward the front of the shop, catching another glimpse of himself in the glass window. His glossy, segmented eyes stared back at him, the long antennae swaying slightly, his insect legs braced against the floor. He swallowed, his mandibles clicking as unease settled deep in his chest. This appearance, this bizarre reflection, gnawed at him. But it couldn't be real, right? He couldn't be a giant bipedal bug. Could he? Josiah stood there, stunned. He turned back to his reflection in the glass and saw the truth. He was indeed a giant insect-like creature. Antennae twitched on his head. His legs were thin and jointed. His skin, or exoskeleton, was shiny like a beetle's shell. It didn't make sense. He couldn't be a bug. No, he was Blug, and he was an exterminator. Moments later, the shop door burst open again, and the customer returned, this time with a police officer in tow. The officer's eyes went wide as he took in the sight of Josiah, antennae twitching nervously, his jointed arms raised in a surrendering gesture.
Whoa! Stay where you are!
The officer barked, immediately drawing his weapon. Josiah's heart, or whatever was left of it, pounded in his chest. He raised his insect-like hands higher, trying to show he wasn't a threat.
Wait, officer, I can explain.
Josiah's voice wavered, sounding almost as alien as he looked.
Get on the ground, now!
The officer yelled, his eyes never leaving Josiah. The customer from earlier was standing behind the officer, pointing at Josiah, shaking visibly, as if urging the officer to do something, anything, to make this nightmare disappear.
Please, this is just a misunderstanding,
Josiah said, antennae drooping as he slowly tried to move back. He could hear the officer calling for backup into his radio, reporting that he had some kind of giant bug that was definitely not human. Not human? He flinched at the officer's harsh description, the words cutting deeper than any sting. He could feel the shame creeping over him, hot and suffocating. He just wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole, anything to make this humiliation stop. How could this be real? How could he be something so monstrous that even the police looked at him like a threat?
Please,
he whispered, his voice breaking. But the officer's glare never softened, the barrel of his gun never lowering. All Josiah could do was stand there, feeling smaller than he ever had, wishing he could disappear. And then, just like that, everything vanished. The shop, the officer, the shelves, all of it gone in an instant. Josiah felt himself blink out of existence along with it, leaving behind only emptiness and confusion. But what the police officer witnessed that day wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the discovery of something much more dangerous. Josiah, once a man, was no longer just a person. He was something far stranger. Shortly after the incident, Blug's Pesky solutions caught the attention of the SCP Foundation, following reports of a vanishing shop with an insect-like humanoid at the helm. It didn't take long for the Foundation to begin investigating and classify the anomaly as SCP-7386. Foundation agents initially monitored the anomaly for several weeks, observing the demanifestation and remanifestation patterns. Each time the shop appeared, it would replace an existing building, only to vanish again when its true nature was revealed. SCP-7386 doesn't have a fixed location. Instead, it pops up randomly around the world, replacing another store in the area. One day, it may show up in a shopping plaza in Cape Town, and the next, it could appear in a strip mall in Colorado. It never stays in one spot for long. Once Josiah's shop disappears, the original store reappears, as if nothing had happened. Inside, the shop always looks the same. It has a single floor with aisles packed with every product imaginable for dealing with pests, especially insects. There's a small office area and a counter for Josiah to assist his customers. Josiah is the sole worker, and if asked, he tells everyone he owns the shop and runs it just as he had always dreamed. Josiah, or SCP-7386-1, stands over 2 meters tall, with long antennae nearly as long as his body. His 4 front legs are jointed like an insect's, while his 2 hind legs remain more humanoid, making his movements surprisingly smooth. He looks like a bizarre blend of man and cerambicid beetle, but he still acts like the enthusiastic exterminator he once was. When dealing with customers, SCP-7386-1 is friendly, almost overly eager, so long as no one mentions his insectoid appearance. If someone does, his demeanor shifts to anger and distress, triggering another demanifestation. The Foundation knows better than to provoke him. Although accounts of unusual phenomena potentially linked to SCP-7386 stretch back to the late 1990s, the Foundation first formally identified SCP-7386 during its manifestation in Cape Town on October 12, 2023. Foundation agents stationed nearby quickly reported it, and a squad was dispatched to try and contain it. But before they could do anything, the shop, along with SCP-7386-1, vanished, demanifesting right before their eyes. They soon realized that whenever anyone commented on SCP-7386-1's bug-like appearance or tried to force him out of the shop, the whole place would vanish without a trace. Anyone still inside during a demanifestation? Well, they would disappear too, never to be seen again. The Foundation has tried to develop protocols to contain SCP-7386 whenever it reappeared, and have even managed to restrict access to the shop during one of its manifestations in Providence, Rhode Island, and later in Telluride, Colorado. There they boarded up windows, hung permanently closed signs on the door, and kept a close watch on it with disguised personnel to ensure no one could go inside. Foundation investigations have revealed records pertaining to the National Pest Extermination Incorporated and documentation that refers to an exterminator who worked there named Josiah, but the details were vague. The Foundation continues to dig into those old logs, trying to piece together the story of how a man turned into something so monstrous, yet still clung to the only life he ever knew, running a pest control shop, even if he is now more pest than human. SCP-7386 remains officially classified as a KETER-level anomaly due to its unpredictable nature and dangerous ability to demanifest without warning. And since SCP-7386-1 displays highly volatile emotional responses when confronted about his transformation, the SCP Foundation maintains strict containment protocols for SCP-7386. Any personnel interacting with SCP-7386-1 must avoid direct mention of its insectoid form, as triggering its emotional response results in immediate demanifestation. To date, no survivors have been recovered from inside the shop during these events. SCP-7386 remains uncontained, and its unpredictable manifestations continue to pose a constant threat to public safety. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, and be sure to subscribe as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives.